All right. Thank you, Carrie. So guys, thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedules here today. Really appreciate it. I know that pretty much all of you guys are familiar, obviously, with Journyx. Probably use Journyx to track time on projects for a number of different reasons. Maybe measuring your costs on projects, trying to determine what people are spending their time on, things like that. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is some of the other solutions that Journyx offers that could provide additional value to your organization. Obviously, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the question session in the GoToMeeting panel. Also, feel free to reach out to me directly or any of your account managers if you have additional questions also about anything that we see here today. So from an agenda standpoint, the main three things I wanted to cover with you is around the ability to track expenses in Journyx in addition to time. I want to talk to you guys about our new Journyx WX solution and how that relates for time for payroll. Also wanted to talk to you guys about our Journyx PX solution, which really sort of adds a layer of project resource, capacity planning, resource optimization, and a little bit more around project scheduling and estimation. So I want to really cover those three main topics here this morning. So when we're talking about expense tracking, so what's the business need there? Who needs to use this? So you're either probably tracking expenses or have the need to track expenses so that you can reimburse your employees for payroll purposes. You may want to track expenses back against a project because it may contribute to the additional costs against that project in addition to your labor time, so you can have a complete picture of your costs on a project. Or maybe you need to bill those back to a client, so you want to run those through your ERP solution for billing purposes. So for the expense demo, what I want to walk you through is the ease of use for entering expenses through the web and talk about doing that through the mobile interface as well. I want to talk about our ability to attach receipt images through the web interface and the mobile. Our ability to handle multiple currencies, so we can, for our international customers out there, our ability to convert that into native currency, be able to track both mileage, convert that in mileage in kilometers, and convert that into to dollars for you, and then also some expense reporting and the approval. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Journyx. This is Journyx 12 for those folks that are not familiar with our newest version. And I'm going to log in as somebody who can track their expenses in Journyx. For the ease of user experience, you can see the expense entry screen looks pretty much identical to the timesheet. Same sort of concept with the expense entry. On this left-hand side, you have some configurable drop-down columns. There is still the comment field for entering in additional comments or notes against the expenses people are recording. And we have the entry grid on the right-hand side. Same flexibility here. You can rename these drop-down columns to be whatever you would like. You can hide any columns that are not in use. The entry grid on the right can be a different length of period, can start on a different day of the week. The expense entry process works pretty much just like the time entry process. And for example, maybe I'm picking what project this expense is associated to. I can pick from a configurable list of what we're calling expense codes. I can choose my source. So a source might be, is it a company credit card? Is it reimbursable to the employee? And then I mentioned we do have the ability to support multiple currencies as well. We can put in currency conversions here. So if I track, let's say, a car rental in euro, then I can convert that back into US dollars for reporting purposes. But let's just say on Tuesday, I checked that rental car back in and it was 1 day for $75. I can enter in my dollars here and hit save. Well, I can try to do that without getting an error message. Awesome. There we go. Let's just chalk that up to user error. So I enter in my expenses, and then once I enter my expense and hit save, I have the ability to come in here and attach this receipt image. So I can click this little caret icon here. That would allow me to go in and attach a receipt image to this expense. It could be a number of different file formats that you can predetermine on a configuration setting, but it would allow me to attach that receipt image to this expense. Those receipt images are stored in the Journyx database, so you can see those receipt images in both the approval workflow process. You can also see those when you are running an expense report on the back end. No, those same processes can be done through the mobile app. Matt probably covered that a little bit more this morning, but you can record expenses through the mobile app. You can attach receipt images through the mobile app. So if I wanted to take a picture of my receipt image with my iPhone, then I could feed that in through the mobile app into the web interface, and it would do that in real time. And again, that receipt image would be stored in the backend Journyx database. The expense entry functionality also does give you the ability to import credit card files. So most of your credit card companies or banks will allow you to download a file in a number of different formats that you could actually import into your expense sheet. You'd be presented with an interface that would allow you to then choose which expenses from your credit card that you want to upload to your sheet. At that same time, you can associate them to the different projects and expense codes that might be associated with those expenses, and you can basically import them in from that upload file onto your expense sheet. Once I do have my expenses entered for the period, I can go ahead and submit my expense sheet for approval. And that's going to send that through a workflow process, just like your sort of a timesheet workflow process would. The difference here probably is that you would be using different email notifications. So you might use the submission email notification, maybe the approval or rejection notifications, but potentially not the reminders or late notifications because you may not have consistent use of the expense entry. So that's an overview of entering expenses in from an end user perspective. What I want to go ahead and do is sign out as this end user. And I'm going to go ahead and log in as an administrator and take a couple look at things. So first of all, we've got some notifications in Journyx 12 that tell you things like approvals, leave requests. But within my approvals now, you can see I've got this expense sheet that I just submitted. So in normal approval form, this is in summary format first. So I can see the user, the period. I can see this is an expense type and the total dollars that have been submitted. If I wanted to, I could check that, go ahead and approve it or reject it from this summary screen. Alternatively, I could click on this period link. That's going to open up the additional detail, and I could go ahead and approve or reject it from this screen as well. I do also have the option to view this in a full sheet mode, and you can see this is where I can come in here and see the expense attachments that have been associated with that particular expense sheet that was approved. Expense approvals work just like the time approvals in that I can have multiple levels of approval. Within each level, I can have both a primary and alternate approver. So if somebody was out sick or on vacation, my expense approvals could be routed to their alternate approver so they're not stuck in that approval workflow process. And then from a reporting standpoint, Journyx does have the ability to analyze and run reports over both time and expense data. So I've got my expense report here. If I was to run that, expand that data, you can see in this particular case, I am subtotaling this by employee. And then I'm showing out here to the right, you can see the expense attachment. So if I wanted to view that attachment directly from the report, because those receipt images are stored in the Journyx database, I'm able to see that. So hopefully that is a pretty good overview over expense entry, approvals of expenses, and reporting against expenses. So I want to go ahead and transition back over to my PowerPoint here. And again, if there are additional questions, feel free to add those to the chat window. The next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is our new Journyx WX solution. Really, it's designed for people that need to track time for payroll. So why would you need to do that? Obvious reason is to collect employees' hours for payroll processing. So if you're trying to reimburse people for their effort that they're providing to your organization. But within that is the ability to do overtime calculations, but also be able to do time off. So leave requests, holiday tracking, PTO, time off, things like that, all within one solution. So for the demo, I want to show you guys what the user experience looks like for entering my time for payroll. Go ahead and track some time off. But then I also want to show you guys a little bit about two of our features that you may not be aware of, and that is the ability to calculate, display, and validate against leave balances in Journyx, and also a feature to create overtime calculations and produce export files out of Journyx for your payroll solution. So with that being said, let me jump back over to Journyx. And let me log out as that administrator, and I'm going to log in as my WX user. So WX, it's just a different feature set that we offer here at Journyx. Instead of tracking your time for projects and activities and billable, non-billable, things like this, WX is really meant for those people in your organization that may only need to track time for payroll. Instead of trying to track some of your people's time for payroll in a third-party reporting solution like an ADP, and some of your employees' time in Journyx for time on projects, the nice benefit here is that you can have everybody track all of their time in one solution and have a holistic picture of all of the time and effort in one database. So you can see the timesheet for WX looks just like it does for Journyx. The difference here is that there's just one drop-down column that by default is called pay type. You certainly could still configure the name of that drop-down column, but by default it's pay type, and it's going to consist of things like regular time, holiday, sick day, vacation, or whatever options make sense for you guys. There is still a comment field for entering additional comments or notes, and the same time entry grid is available here to the right-hand side. So normally, if I'm working throughout the day on payroll, let's just say I worked 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Let's say on Friday I had to take a sick day, so I'm going to enter in 8 hours of sick time, and I can save that just like I do normally in Journyx. If you're not aware, though, Journyx does also have the ability to calculate, display, and validate against leave balances in the application. So you can either import these balances, you can create these balances manually, you could import these balances from a third-party solution like your payroll solution, or Journyx also has an accrual calculator feature set that I'll show you here in a bit that can calculate those balances for you. We can also validate against those balances. So one option is to not allow anybody to go negative. So it would not allow somebody to take more time that they've got allotted to them. You do also have the ability to set a threshold that would allow them to go negative by only a certain amount. So maybe you allow somebody to take more time than they've been allotted because they're going to earn that throughout the year. But then you can set a threshold that says maybe they can only take 8 more hours than they've got allotted to them. So they end up taking, 50 hours more than they should earn throughout the year. So you have that flexibility. Journyx does also give you the ability to do what we call a leave request. A leave request basically allows you to request time off in advance directly through Journyx. So if I wanted to take a leave request, let's say I wanted to take next Friday off for vacation, I can go ahead and submit that leave request through a separate workflow process that's going to have email notifications. There is a leave calendar, so maybe managers can view all of their employees and all the time off that's been requested, so they can make sure that they don't have too many people taking off on a certain day. That's all available through Journyx. If somebody were to approve my leave request, it would actually go ahead and populate that leave time onto my timesheet, so I don't have to re-enter that. That same thing can be said for any company holidays that you have. So if you want to create your holiday schedules in Journyx, we can also pre-populate that holiday time onto their timesheet as well. Once I'm done with my timesheet, I can go ahead and submit that timesheet for approval through WX as well. And then the same email notification reminders are optional within WX. So reminder emails, late notifications, submission emails, and then also the ability to notify employees when their timesheet has either been approved or if it's been rejected. As a reminder, you guys do have the ability to configure the title, the body, and the timing of when those emails are sent. And really, they're just meant to help facilitate that workflow process and make sure that people are submitting these timesheets in a timely fashion. So that is WX from an end user perspective. Again, a simple, easy way to enter time for payroll, track my time off, validate against leave balances, and request time off in advance. So I want to go ahead now and sign out as our WX user and log back in as our admin. The two things I want to focus on for you guys from an administrative perspective, first is that accrual calculation feature set within Journyx. So within the accrual calculator, what I can do is I can come in here and I can create different accrual tiers. So these are two examples. I created a tier for my full-time employees, and I created a tier for my part-time employees. So what these tiers allow you to do is create basically different business rules for accruing people's time and their time off balances throughout the year. So in this particular case, what this rule is telling me is that anybody that's worked more than 0 hours in Journyx, or years in Journyx, can accrue 2 hours of vacation every time the accrual calculator is run. So you could run that accrual calculator on whatever frequency makes sense for you guys. So you could run that once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, once a year, depending on the timing and when people need to accrue time off. But if I was to run the accrual calculator now, what this means is that anybody who is designated as a full-time employee would receive 2 additional hours added to their vacation bucket of leave. And anybody who is a part-time employee would receive 1 hour added to their vacation bucket. So you have the ability to set these accrual tiers by basically how long somebody's been an employee for you and what type of an employee that they are. So that combination creates these accrual tiers. And then as you run the accrual calculator, which is done again through an import that can be done, and that can be run on demand, that can be scheduled to run on an ongoing basis. But anytime that tool runs, and I'll just go ahead and preview it for you, what this is going to do is anybody that falls into a full-time employee, so Candace, Jess, or Rhonda are all full-time employees, so they would all get 2 hours added to their vacation bucket based on the tiers that we just looked at. And then Steve and user, which is me, would get 1 hour because they're designated as part-time employees. So it's a real nice feature set for you guys to be able to set up at the beginning and let that go ahead and run in the background. And it takes care of that ongoing accrual calculation for you. And then those accrual calculations that are done are, again, the accrual balances that would appear on their timesheets when they're tracking their time against that. The other feature set that I wanted to show you guys is around the overtime calculations and the creation of an export file that can be exported out of Journyx into your different payroll solutions. So we call this feature set the Payroll Rules Engine. And the Payroll Rules Engine basically allows you to configure what we call different pay groups. So think of that as like exempt, non-exempt, but it could also be part-time employees, full-time employees. However you want to group your employees together that might have different payroll rules associated to them. And then within these different pay groups, you can come in here and create different rules. So for example, I created a non-exempt pay group. Within this non-exempt pay group, they are on a weekly cycle. And the overtime rule that I'm creating here is any hours over 40 hours in a week would automatically be calculated as overtime. But in our 24 years of focusing on timesheets, we have many of the standard rules that are out there. So all of your California 8, 10, 12 rules, your maybe 3644 rules, a number of different rules. So most of the standard state rules, we have those in Journyx at this point. If there's anything custom that needs to be done, occasionally we'll see some special union rules, things like that. Then our professional services team could certainly work with you to customize and configure that specific overtime rule to fit within this payroll rules engine framework. But essentially, I create my pay groups, I designate my overtime rule calculations, I come into my different pay types, and I can manage which pay type should count towards overtime calculations, which ones shouldn't. And once I configure my payroll rules engine settings, then what I can do when it's time to process payroll is I can come in here and I can choose my pay groups. I can choose the pay period that I'm looking for. And then I can go ahead and preview that. Now this particular example is formatted for ADP. But you can see here it has the batch IDs, it has the employee's name. This file ID is like the employee's ID, so that maps the employee with Journyx and ADP. It's showing me a breakdown of the regular hours versus sick time hours. This would also break out overtime. So if I had recorded 45 hours as a non-exempt employee, it would automatically break those 45 hours into 40 hours of regular time and 5 hours of overtime. Once I've got my data correct, it all looks correct to me, then I can come back in here to my payroll settings. I can choose those pay groups, and instead of doing a preview, I can go ahead and export that file. And it's going to go ahead and create a file that is formatted for your payroll provider that would allow you to save that file and then just go into your payroll solution and import that file directly into that payroll solution. But it's going to have all the breakdown of the hours between regular hours, sick day, vacation, overtime. So you're not having to manually calculate that with the information from Journyx. So from a WX standpoint, again, the main things I wanted to talk to you guys about were the ease of entry, the ability to track time off, the ability to calculate, display, and validate against leave balances, the ability to request time off in advance. But then I also wanted to make sure that I covered the accrual calculator feature set, which can calculate your ongoing leave balances, but also the payroll rules engine feature set, which allows you to create pay groups with different business rules and overtime calculations, and the ability to export that data out to your payroll solution. All right, so I'm going to jump back over to our PowerPoint here. And the last feature solution that I wanted to cover you guys was Journyx PX. So Journyx PX really adds on top of the Journyx project time tracking, the ability to do project resource capacity planning, resource optimization. It does also add a layer of project management reporting that may not be available with the standard Journyx project time tracking. So as I mentioned a little before, it helps you to optimize resource allocation on projects. It can add some additional functionality around comparing actual work to budgets. Can allow you to request resources from other resource management or departments, and also communicate project status through alerts and reporting directly through Journyx. So for demonstration purposes, I want to walk through the process of sort of doing project resource assignments, being able to take a look at what resource availability views and reports look like in Journyx PX. Then we'll take a look at it sort of from an end user perspective and take a look at some of the what we call the My Assignments view for end users. Then we can also take a look at doing resource requisitions, work requests, and some of the dashboard reporting abilities that are available with PX that are in addition to what's available with Journyx. So I will go ahead and go back to Journyx. And while I'm logged in as an administrator, what I'll point out to you guys is with Journyx, when you're tracking time on projects, you're used to tracking time against projects. With Journyx PX, we've added an additional data object that we call a scheduled project. And so I think the easiest way to walk you guys through this process is for me to go ahead and create a new scheduled project and go ahead and assign that out through to resources. So I'm on my scheduled projects management screen here, the bottom right corner. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. And let's just say this is going to be project 4. For project 4, let's say we want this project is going to be, we know it's going to be a 200-hour project. And we're going to start that project in March. And we think that's probably going to take us the whole month of March. So what that's going to do by creating that start and end date is give me a duration. I can come in here and say, you know what, this is going to be a $25,000 project for us so that we can compare actual cost to that budget and do a % complete or variance reporting in PX. We can also do things like budgeted profit, budgeted revenue, budgeted ROI, and all of those fields are available in some of the additional PX reporting that is available. You still have the ability to create, customize different custom fields against this scheduled project. And then once I filled out all of the appropriate data for this scheduled project, normally in Journyx, I would just either click Save to create the project or click Save and New to create that project and create a new project. With PX, what I'll want to do is click this Save and View Assignments button. So this will go ahead and create that scheduled project. It will first summarize this project for me. So it's got my budget of hours, it's got my scheduled start and end date, it's got my duration, and this kind of lays this out to the right in a little bit more of a graphical format. But then what I'll do next is I will find the right resources to work on this particular project. So across the top are some search criteria that you can customize. So if you wanted to categorize your resources by some sort of custom field, let's say that might be by skill set or by location, by tenure, any way that you can think that you might classify your resources so that it would help you when you're trying to search for the ideal resources to work on projects, you have that flexibility to add that to your search criteria here at the top. Now for my demonstration purposes, I don't have a ton of resources in the system, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit the search button. When I hit the search button, what it's going to show me are all of the resources that met my search criteria for the duration of this project, which is this project 4 that I just created. So for the month of March, it's going to show me in this white area the available time that people have to work on this particular project. Now this gray area is time that I've predetermined that people just can't work on projects. So the % of time I work on meetings or overhead or anything that really isn't project related, by resource, you can set what % of their week or % of their time is not available to work on projects, and it's going to display in this gray area. So for these 200 hours for project 4 over the month of March, let's say that I wanted to go ahead and pick these 4 resources to work on that project. Now I could come down to the bottom and click Save Assignments and Start Again, and maybe go ahead and create a new scheduled project and go through that same assignment process. What I could also choose to do is click this Save Assignment and modify my allocations. When I do that, it's going to bring me to a management screen that will allow me to adjust the assignments or scheduled work for those resources. So by default, Project 4 had 200 hours scheduled for it, and I picked 4 resources. So by default, it's going to divide those 200 hours by 4 and assign 50 hours to each resource. But maybe it's because I know that somebody's busy, I know that somebody's better at this type of work than somebody else. From this management screen, you can adjust people's resource assignments. So I can say, well, this resource is going to get 75 hours, this person's going to get 25, maybe this person is going to get 40, and therefore this person is going to get 60. So you can adjust your resource assignments on this project. You can also come down here at the very bottom to this custom fields, and this is a really good area to be able to adjust your assignment-based cost or billable rates. So PX, in addition to having project-based cost and billable rates, user-based cost and billable rates, PX gives you the flexibility to add assignment-based rates. So this would be their cost rate or their billable rate on this very specific assignment between this resource on that project. So you can adjust these assignment-based rates from this view as well. Then when I click Save, this will go ahead and formalize the process of creating a scheduled project, creating the specific amounts of effort on that project, creating a start and end date, which will create my duration for that project, and then I'm finding the right resources to assign to that project, and I'm assigning very specific amounts of effort on that project to those resources. By doing that process, what it allows me to do is have a forward-looking view of resource availability. So with Journyx right now, when you're tracking your time on projects, that is a very good process for being able to get me a picture on what's already happened. How much time have we spent on this project? What are my costs associated with this project based on the work that's already been done? But there's not a very clear picture going forward. So PX gives you that forward-looking view. And again, by assigning people with specific amounts of effort on these scheduled projects, we then have additional views and reports within PX that allows you to have that picture. One of those views in PX is the ability to view resource availability. So for example, let's say if I wanted to go look out over maybe just the rest of February. Here at the top, I have the ability to, again, use different search criteria to filter out certain resources by skill set, by location. In this case, I want to look for anybody that has the role of a scheduled project management user. I could also aggregate my search results by any of these attributes, but I'm going to go ahead and hit the search button. And what this resource availability view is providing me is that forward-looking picture. So for the rest of February, these are the resources that met my search criteria. These green boxes show me what people are already assigned to work on during that time period. So you can see I'm scheduled to work on Project 1, Project 2, and Project 3. I've got about 16 hours of available time left over this time frame. And again, this gray area tells me the time that you have predetermined that I can't work on projects. This availability calendar shows you when I'm busy. So you can see I've got a little bit more time assigned to me this first week of this time period, and then it kind of tapers off a little bit towards the end of the period. Out to the right is that same information in more of a textual type format. So for between the 19th and the 29th, there are 51.2 hours available to be scheduled. 35 of those have already been assigned to me. So this is the variance of that number, and this is my percent allocation. So over this time period, I'm about 69% allocated over that time period. So this is a really good view that will tell you, help you answer the question, do I have enough resources available to work on other projects coming down the pipeline? how available are those resources to work on those projects, and do I have the right resources based on skill sets, locations, things like that to work on those projects coming down the pipeline, or do I need to find an outsourcing company? Do I need to hire some consultants? This really gives you that forward-looking view. In addition to that view, there are some additional reports that are available within PX. One of those reports is a simple assignment summary report. So if I go ahead and run that, what this report is doing for me is it's subtotaling by resource, and then within each resource, the different projects that have been assigned to me. This is configurable, but I'm choosing to show my scheduled start and end date, my scheduled hours, and then the actual hours I've recorded against that. There are some additional reports that are available within PX. One of those reports is a scheduled project status report type. This report basically allows you to list out the different projects you're working on. It can show you different alerts or warnings. I can show you who the project owner is, scheduled start and end dates, scheduled work, actual work, and a percent complete. So this is more of a project status report that you can view. As you click into some of these alerts and warnings, it can provide you a summary of that project, show you all of the assignments for that, but also allows you to see these different alerts. You can see in this particular example, Brian has not recorded any hours against this project over the last 4 days. So it's a nice little reporting feature that's available with PX around project scheduling, project statusing, resource availability. Within Journyx 12, we also, again, have that dashboard view that's available, but you can include any of these additional reports that are available with PX onto this dashboard as well. So you can see I've got a breakdown by assignment, by project on my dashboard, and this is that assignment report that we just looked at. So that covers kind of the main process for within PX, the ability to create scheduled projects, assign those scheduled projects out to resources. Because you're going through that work, you then have forward-looking views like the resource availability view, the assignment view. I will go ahead and mention at this point, because I think there was some interest mentioned previously, that both Journyx, but primarily Journyx PX customers might also have an interest in integrating with Microsoft Project. Journyx does have an off-the-shelf integration tool with Microsoft Project that we call Project Link. Project Link allows you to do a bi-directional integration between Microsoft Project and Journyx. A very common use case scenario then would be to schedule all of your projects and tasks and WBS structures in Microsoft Project. You might then bring those project WBSs from Microsoft Project into Journyx PX, assign all of your resources to those scheduled projects directly in PX so that you've got a broader view of all the resources across the organization. People can then track their time against those projects and tasks in Journyx, and then we can push that time from Journyx back into Microsoft Project as actual work. So that I make sure that I give people enough time to ask questions and for me to answer them, the last thing that I really wanted to focus on is a new end user view that is tied into Journyx PX that we call My Assignments. So I'm going to log back in as, I think I've got them as PX here. And for those folks obviously familiar with tracking time on projects, you'd be used to a timesheet that looks something like this, where I pick my project, I pick my activity, potentially my pay type, enter my hours, hit save, and submit. What PX offers is an additional view to the end user called the My Assignment screen. So this My Assignment screen, think of it almost as like a to-do list. So a lot of our PX customers will use the My Assignment screen because it shows me all the projects I've been specifically assigned to work on. It will show me when I've been scheduled to start and end on that project. It will show me my assignments against that project. It will track my actual hours that I've tracked against that project to compare it to my assignment and give me a variance remaining. So it's more of that to-do list for the end user. You can track your time on this My Assignments list, but I will say most of our customers that track time on projects and use PX will go ahead and use this as their almost like their project schedule, and then enter time through their normal standard timesheets against those projects. You can also communicate with the project owner. So for example, it's telling me I've got 9 hours remaining on this project, but I know it's going to take me 20 hours to do that. I can request more time from that project owner, and I can go ahead and submit that request through an email and an alert to that project owner. That project owner can take that request from me. They could either then choose to take those additional hours and assign them directly to me through that assignment process that we went through previously, or they could, divvy that out to other resources throughout the organization as they see fit. But it's a nice way to be able to communicate that project request, that project status request through the application without having to use Excel spreadsheets, without having to use email, independent of Journyx, to be able to do those additional project effort requests directly through the application. Carrie, I think at this point, just to give us enough time for questions and answers, that's most of what I wanted to walk through you guys. But in summary, what I wanted to get across in this session is that in addition to tracking time on projects in Journyx, you do also have the ability to track expenses as part of the core solution. In addition to the core Journyx solution, we offer additional solutions for Journyx WX, which is your time for payroll solution for tracking time on payroll, tracking time off, leave requests, accrual calculation, and exports to your payroll solutions, including overtime. And Journyx PX really adds that layer of project resource capacity planning, resource optimization, additional project scheduling features, and potential integrations with other business solutions like Microsoft Project. So at this point, I guess I will turn that over to Carrie for additional questions that might have been submitted through the panel. You can also see my contact information here for those folks that don't know me directly. Feel free to reach out to me directly for additional questions, or feel free to reach out to your account managers if you have any interest in learning more about any of the solutions that I've talked about today.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. We do have a few questions for you. First of all, is the dashboard feature only in Journyx 12? And does it only show the people that report to you?
So first question is that the dashboard concept that you saw that I showed is only available in Journyx 12 and newer. The previous versions of Journyx had a concept of a dashboard for Journyx PX, but the new and improved general reporting dashboarding is only available in Journyx 12 and newer. And then as far as displaying data permissions within Journyx reporting in general, for those that are familiar with our grouping functionality, Journyx uses a combination of groups and permission levels through role to limit what people have access to throughout the application. That includes being able to control what you have the ability to report on. So you can use a combination of groups and permission levels within Journyx to limit what people have access to report on in general in Journyx, but also through that dashboard view that we saw previously.
Thank you. Next question. We noticed that leave requests for future events in which leave will be available at that time but is not available now will not allow employees to enter a leave request. Is that still the case, or can that be changed in configuration?
So you can enter a leave request in advance, even if you don't have the time allocated to your bucket. Now, when you submit your leave request through for approval, whoever is choosing to approve or decline that leave request can have visibility to that leave balance that you have. at that point in time, they can choose to approve or decline that leave request. Now, it's only when that leave request is approved and actually saved to your timesheet that it's going to affect your available leave balance. So then the question is on whether you choose to have your leave balance have the flexibility to allow them to go negative. If you don't allow them to go negative and they're trying to take more time off than they've got allotted to them, the system is not going to allow them to do that. However, again, as I mentioned, you could choose to give them a bit of a buffer and allow them to go negative, but then you can set the threshold on how negative that could go. But to summarize that again, you can still do a leave request in Journyx, even if they don't have the balance available to do so. Whoever is reviewing and approving that leave request can then make the decision whether they want to go ahead and approve or decline that request based on your leave balance. It's not going to affect your leave balance until it actually gets saved to your actual timesheet.
Okay, thank you. Next question. So in PX, as you were showing it, you changed the amount of hours that each person is assigned to the project. Does it validate it to the total number of hours for the project? Example being, the project is 200 hours, but when you change to the allocated time, you put in more than the 200 hours.
It would allow you to adjust that over, but it's going to adjust your assignment in total if you take the hours more than what's available in those 200 hours.
Okay, great. And then also in PX, it's kind of a two-parter. Would the time from PX roll up to the project or be on each task? And then the second part is, will it roll up in Microsoft Project to the project?
So good question. So in reporting in Journyx and PX, it can roll up to the parent. So if you track time, so typically if you have a multi-layer work breakdown structure where you got project, sub-project, task is a 3-layer, let's say, you most likely would be assigning the effort at that task level or that lowest leaf of that WBS. In that particular case, people would track their time against that task, but then you can roll that up to the different levels of the work breakdown structure within Journyx and PX. When we send that time over as actual hours in Microsoft Project, it's going to send that time back over at that task level. But then by nature, if I had recorded 10 hours against a task that has a parent project, when it goes back over as actual work into that Microsoft Project plan, it then is also going to roll up to that parent level of the WBS in Microsoft Project.
Okay, great. We've got a lot of questions for you, Brian. So another one, does the user enter time into Journyx basic, just the basic project time, and then PX pulls that data into it for reporting?
It does. Think about Journyx PX as a license key enabled feature set. So you plug a different license key into Journyx and it turns more stuff on, to simplify that. So it's the same database, it's the same product, so you're not having to implement a completely foreign product. It turns on more features, but you're still using the same Journyx database. So anytime you enter on the basic sort of Journyx timesheet, that is fed through any of the standard Journyx reports, any of the standard Journyx PX reports, or any of the views as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Will each end user in Journyx also need to have a license for PX? I think you may have kind of sort of answered that question just now, but you might want to answer maybe in a different way. Or does just the actual project manager need a license?
You would need a license for PX for any person that would have a scheduled project assigned to them through that assignment process. So most likely it would be any of your end users in Journyx, unless you had maybe like some contractors where you're not assigning projects to them, but they're tracking time in there for some other business purpose.
Okay, great. A lot of PX questions. When you import a project, does it import every WBS line as a Journyx project?
If you import that in from like a Microsoft project, there's a setting in project that would allow you to ignore different levels of the WBS. If you do that, it will ignore those. But by default, using Project Link, it will bring in the entire layers of your work breakdown structure into PX.
Okay, I've got 3 more questions, and then we're going to move into lunch here. So this is a follow-up to the MS project question from before. So if a person logs time to 5 different tasks on the same project, will it integrate to MS project and all the hours will log up to the project?
It would. So the time that I worked against each of those individual tasks are a subtask underneath a higher level project in your WBS. When you track your time against those tasks in Journyx or PX, when we send that time back over as actual work into Microsoft Project, the hour I track against task A will go against task A. The 10 hours against task B will go against task B. So when all of those hours go back in as actual work against those lower level tasks, they will then all roll up to that parent project in the work breakdown structure in Microsoft Project.
All right, last 2 questions. Can managers see leave balances only as it pertains to their specific area and department? Where do you set that up?
That's going to come back to those group and permission levels questions around, same thing for reporting. So Journyx does have the flexibility to create those group permission combination so that you can only have access to leave balances that you want your managers to have access to.
So, and that's configurable, like you can configure for managers to only see their own areas or department requests?
It is. It's configurable, whether you do that by person, by department, by team, whatever sort of grouping combination makes sense for you guys.